particular or specific giftings of everybody in the room because it has been intentional to try to get different voices for this gathering. And so it is, I think it will be helpful as we share. And I'm going to try to set, quote unquote, the vision for our time together now. So I'm going to spend some time talking about grounding, about definitions / known terms, objectives and timelines,
los objetivos,
vision,
que tenemos para estas visiones que tenemos en este encuentro,
and then our background readings for all of our engagement.
Y entonces tenemos algunas lecturas que son como un background de todo lo que hemos estado haciendo.
The grounding for the Pentecostal experience, Theology Brewed in an African Pot, is in Acts 2. That's why we met.
El fundamento para la teoría pentecostal en la cuestión africana.
Right at Pentecost. And it is for the purposes for us to begin to identify power sources.
Identificar las fuentes de poder.
And those power sources are not necessarily external.
Y esas fuentes de poder no son necesariamente externas.
And so in Acts 2, there are 7 things that I want to pull out. I'm not going to try to preach them or expand upon, but for you to consider and to think.
Para que ustedes consideren y piensen.
1, they tarried 50 days. They tarried 50 days. They stayed together a period of time.
Se reúnen por 50 days.
50 days.
50 días.
All we really know what they did in that upper room for those 50 days.
Y lo único que sabemos que hicieron durante esos 50 días
is they prayed.
Fue que rezaron.
And they selected a new apostle.
Y seleccionaron un nuevo apóstol.
And I want to suggest to you that they communicated with God.
Y voy a sugerir a ustedes que ellos se comunicaron con Dios.
And they communicated with one another.
Y que se comunicaron entre ellos también.
She's
asking where was that?
In Acts 2.
En el libro de Hechos de
Acts 2. Yeah. I want to suggest to you that they communicated with God and that they communicated with one another. And I purposely want you to reflect on the phrase one another.
Y quiero que reflexionemos en esta frase, unos con los otros, uno con el otro.
One of the years I was at Brown University, Professor Borges, who at that time was chair of the Africana Studies program, was the opening convocation speaker. Opening convocation speaker.
Estaba haciendo convocaciones para hablar.
From a very secular point,
de un punto de vista muy secular,
he talked about the difference between other and one another.
Habló de la diferencia entre el otro y los unos y los otros, o uno y el otro.
He challenged our language and our thinking around other as being equated with stranger.
Hizo como un reto al idioma, ¿no? Cuando decimos el otro, lo presentan como una persona que es ajena, alien.
Yes.
Como una persona ajena, cuando decimos el otro.
Which had somewhat of a negative impact.
Y eso tiene, por supuesto, como un impacto negativo también.
But he also talked about, in opposition to that,
y entonces en oposición a esto, esta persona habló
one another.
De el uno con el otro.
Meaning seeing someone as another version of yourself.
Eso quiere decir ver a otra persona como otra versión de uno mismo.
And for a Baptist preacher,
Y para un pastor baptista,
I immediately went to Jesus' love ye one another.
siempre voy a buscar esto de que Jesús siempre va a amar el uno con el otro.
And someone who has spent time in African and African diaspora community,
Y hay quien que haya pasado tiempo en África o en diásporas africanas,
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu, usa la palabra Ubuntu. Sí.
I am because you are.
Yo soy
And you
porque
are
tú eres.
because I
Y
am.
tú eres porque yo soy.
And so from this Pentecostal text and this gathering, a
Entonces, de
key
este texto
component
pentecostal,
is the understanding
yo pienso
and
que en esto
the
nosotros
ability
tiene que estar la habilidad que podamos tener
to be communal with one another.
de ser como una comunidad los unos con los otros aquí.
Another point from the grounding in Acts 2 is that
Y otro punto de este Hechos,
the power filled the house and then those sitting in it.
el poder llenó la casa y entonces a los que estaban sentados en ellas.
So the Holy Ghost filled the space
Es decir, que el Espíritu Santo llenó el espacio
and then everybody in the space
y a todos los que estaban en ese espacio
received the power of the Holy Ghost.
recibieron el poder de ese Espíritu Santo.
The fourth thing,
Y la cuarta cosa,
they spoke in known tongues.
no hablaron en ninguna lengua, en no tongues.
In known tongues.
No tongues.
In known tongues. Meaning that they not only understood one another,
Esto quiere decir que no solo se entendieron unas con las otras,
and people on the outside, the external community, understood them.
las personas que estaban fuera, la comunidad externa también entendió lo que se estaba hablando de adentro.
The fifth thing,
Y la quinta cosa fue,
because of the space and them receiving the power,
debido al espacio en que ellos estaban recibiendo ese poder,
they stood up boldly,
ellos tenían abundancia
proclaiming their truth
al proclamar su verdad
or proclaiming the vision.
o a proclamar la visión, que sería una mejor palabra, no la verdad, su visión.
The very thing they were afraid to do before.
Y eso era algo que ellos temían haber hecho antes de reunirse en ese lugar con ese poder.
And then they were praising God
Estaban adorando a Dios
in their everyday walking around life.
en su día a día caminando por la vida,
And as a result,
y como resultado de eso,
the Lord added daily.
Dios le permitía manifestarse diariamente.
That's kind of where I use this phrase often.
Y aquí es cuando yo uso una frase muy a menudo.
It's not just a prop for me.
No es algo que yo tenga preparado solamente para mí.
It's a resource for direction.
Es un recurso para tomar direcciones.
And so that's the ground in which this convening, this
Esa
gathering
es la fundamentación
is rooted.
que debe estar reglamentándose aquí.
Now, for our purposes, I know I sent you all a lot of emails, you read a lot of things.
Yo sé que les mandé muchos correos, leyeron muchas cosas,
I use a lot of vocabulary and phrases.
mucho vocabulario,
And
frases.
so one of the things I want to take some
Y
time
una cosa que quiero tener
to do
tiempo
today is to define some of that.
es definir
Some
algunas de estos
key
términos.
critical words and phrases.
porque son frases y palabras muy importantes.
I do want to kind of, and I may write this out because I want to put this up so that all during this week you would see those 7 points for
Entonces
grounding.
quiero escribir
You
esto
would
para que en
see
estos 7 días
now the
se
definitions
vean
as
las
well.
definiciones.
Would you like a scribe?
Would you like to describe
I'd be
things?
happy to.
Okay. But you won't be in the video.
I'll make sure my face is in there every now and
She
again.
can just lean.
Yes.
Yeah.
She can just lean a little bit. Like this.
Yeah.
She can just lean and then look right.
So this is not ground up
Ground-
anymore. This is,
I'll
where's my paper? I got you.
I will say every morning before we begin,
Voy a
I've
decir que cada
asked
mañana antes de venir yo voy a pedir
several people to do meditation.
Le voy a pedir a algunas personas que hagan meditación.
And so to set the course, and I gave them actually I said to them, I wasn't giving them any instructions. They didn't have to pray, didn't have to read from the Bible, whatever they felt and
Lo
led
que
to do,
sientan decir para meditar, yo se lo voy a pedir a las personas
to share, to cause us to be in a reflective mode.
para estar en un modo de reflexión nosotros.
And so, even though I'm about to define some of the definitions, from Ideal's meditation this morning,
De la meditación de Ideal esta mañana,
I believe we got it. So,
eso le vamos a conseguirlo.
so
con esta
just for
meditación.
clarity purposes, the first thing I want to talk about or try to define for us is safe space.
Safe space,
Safe space.
espacio seguro, safe space.
What I mean by safe space
Lo que quiere
is
decir con espacio seguro
is that everyone should be free to be you.
que todo el mundo tiene que sentirse libre de ser quien es. Sé quien tú eres en este espacio.
And when I say you, that's also inclusive of your experiences.
Es también que estoy incluyendo sus experiencias.
And
Yo soy
so,
inclusivo con sus experiencias.
ideally, I would love for you to show up in the conversations.
Entonces quiero que ustedes se muestren como son en sus conversaciones, de manera ideal. Es lo que
And,
espero.
and in such a way that you feel that you don't have to be guarded
Que ustedes se sientan que no tienen que ser
or that you're going
juzgados,
to be
cuidados,
judged.
o que van a ser juzgados o juzgadas.
I would like for this to be a space in which we would do no harm,
Quiero que este sea un espacio en el cual no se haga daño,
where we can respectfully disagree
donde de manera respetuosa podemos incluso estar en desacuerdo con algo,
while yet seeking to arrive at a place of consensus.
pero aún así buscar la manera de llegar a un lugar de consenso,
That's if possible.
si es posible.
And so, in a short phrase that I tend to use in a number of the emails and things that you may have seen is shared experiences towards shared resolutions.
Yo siempre he puesto en los correos, compartan las experiencias, compartan sus resoluciones.
And, okay,
Do we have other markers?
I do. I have predicted those.
Mira, aquí
In that
está,
bag there,
está.
that's a
Ay, no
random
lo
thing.
veo. ¿Viste cómo estaba el taller?
Yeah. Oh, it's
Yeah.
small. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what generally what that phrase shared experience, shared resolution is, so that we would have a safe space for you to be you.
Tener un espacio seguro para que usted sea y
Shared
compartiendo sus
experiences and
experiencias y
shared
sus
resolutions.
Yeah. And so I was intentional in the advertisements, in the emails,
Entonces fue lo que hice con toda intención,
etc.
porque lo puse en los-
In the brochure. I didn't use any titles.
Yo no puse título, pero le puse eso.
I didn't put any letters behind people's names.
Yo no puse letras detrás del nombre.
I did. I also did not try to superimpose any sense of religiosity of how we define
Ponerme de
it,
ninguna manera religiosidad,
because I think is also going to be integral to our discussion. And so I didn't want
Eso va a ser
people
muy
to
integral
come
dentro de
to
la
it
discusión.
thinking you had to only think like in a traditional religious kind of way.
porque aquí para llegar a un buen pensamiento no se puede estar pensando de una manera tradicional y recta.
So safe space
Así que tengamos un
is key
espacio
to this
seguro.
work.
Es algo importante en este programa.
The second thing, a phrase that I've
La
used with
segunda
you all
frase que he usado
is courageous conversation.
es conversaciones con coraje o corajudas.
That's to boldly engage.
Eso es para poder involucrarse de manera abierta y atrevida.
One of the things, and I'll use my Morehouse Brothers may, this is relevant to something recent for us. That was the controversy, Morehouse Brothers College. Morehouse College,
Morehouse College tiene una controversia
when President Biden was invited to come to speak as commencement speaker.
cuando el presidente fue invitado a hablar.
My position, or at least the position that I struggled, I was not necessarily opposed to President Biden
Yo necesariamente no estaba opuesto al presidente Biden cuando fue invitado a ese lugar,
because in one breath, as a proponent of liberal arts education,
porque un punto yo soy Siempre estoy proponiendo una educación liberal.
I think it is important to engage those whom I don't always agree with.
Entonces pienso que es importante
Or that
involucrarse
I
con personas
never
con las que
agree.
yo siempre no voy a estar de acuerdo.
Because
Escucharlos.
my experience at Harvard taught me
Porque mi experiencia en Harvard me dijo
I came out stronger
que yo salí más
because
fuerte
it was in that light and in that space. of
cuando estuve en
engagement.
esos espacios con tantas controversias.
And so I think a courageous conversation, and I
Así que
want
pienso
to
que
encourage
conversaciones corajudas,
all of you, whether you agree
Todos
or
ustedes,
disagree,
estén o no estén de acuerdo,
or you believe it
crean.
is politically correct in this
si
hour.
es políticamente
Do
correcto,
not allow that to hinder
no
your
permitan
input.
que eso les corte lo que ustedes pueden contribuir al público.
There is no judgment whether you believe
No
one way or
haber
the other.
juicio con respecto a lo que ustedes digan o crean.
I want to evoke
Yo quiero evocar
critical analysis
un análisis
and
crítico
reflection.
y reflexiones críticas.
So that's why I'm calling it. I use the phrase courageous conversation
Por
because
eso
I
son
want
las
us
frases
to have
conversaciones
those.
corajudas.
As aside to that, one of the reasons I chose for us to live together and to spend time together,
Una de las razones por que yo decidí que estuviésemos
so that
juntos
we could develop somewhat of a relationship, and I tried to communicate with everyone and bring everyone on board, so that perhaps you would have reached out to each other, because I was trying to build that level of comfortability,
para que hubiera un
so
nivel de
that we could be
confianza
courageous
y
and
la
bold.
gente pueda hablar libremente.
The other phrase that I use
La otra frase
is the black church.
es la iglesia negra. Black church.
Somebody's
There is a phone.
The black church. The black church. I'm going to tell you two stories, and then I try to
Le voy
define
a
what I
hacer dos
mean.
cuentos y después seguimos.
Actually, no, let me define first. The black church, the global community of black people
Es la comunidad global de personas
who
negras
identify as Christians.
que se identifica como cristianos.
Now let me give you some, just a simple definition.
Es una definición muy simple
Some examples of what I'm talking about.
y uno es
When I was at Brown, I was the associate Protestant chaplain
cuando yo estaba en Brown era
With-
un asociado,
with civic responsibility
tenía una responsabilidad
to
específica.
Imani Jubilee.
Tú,
To Imani Jubilee.
Imani Jubilee, tú eres Jubilee.
Imani Jubilee. It's the
Para
name.
jubileo.
I actually inherited it from Dr. Callahan.
Y lo
He was
lo
our
heredé de
predecessor.
Galahad.
Imani
No,
Jubilee.
No, you succeeded.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And they traded up.
No, de eso lo cambiaron.
Imani Jubilee was labeled as a worshiping community in the African American tradition.
Ellos le ponían la etiqueta de una comunidad de adoración en África, ¿no?
And much love and respect for the chaplain,
Y con mucho
Jenny
amor y
Cooper
respeto por
Nelson.
mi capilla.
She tried to make it everything but an African American worshiping community.
Pero ella trató de hacer todo ese jubileo de cualquier manera, menos siendo una comunidad afroamericana en su jubileo, lo hacía distinto.
And she did not understand
Yeah,
the
no entendía.
uniqueness of the space
La
for
necesidad del espacio
African black people
Para
on
África.
campus to be a safe space,
para que esas personas afroamericanas en el campus tuvieran un espacio seguro.
to
Ella nunca lo
develop,
entendió.
to grow,
Para
to
que se
question
desarrollaran,
all
para
of
que
those things.
crecieran, para que cuestionaran todo lo que estaba pasando. Ella no logró crear eso.
So for me growing up in the South,
Entonces,
that
para mí,
was
que crecí
the
en el
safe
sur,
space for me, the
Eso
black
era un
church.
espacio seguro. La
While
iglesia
learning
era
to
un
grow.
lugar seguro cuando yo estaba en el sur. Estar en esa iglesia, pero no en el campus.
And you know, just to push one of the envelopes, I am still close to some of the students from Imani Jubilee who
Todavía
were
estoy cerca de
struggling
algunos de esos estudiantes que participaron en esos jubileos,
with their sexuality while at Brown, but having a space where they can begin questioning what they thought were their traditions and their experiences, help them come to a place
no se sentían seguros en ese lugar que le llamaban un lugar para la comunidad africana religiosa.
that they could discover themselves.
No podían descubrirse que estaban siendo seguros.
When I was in Ghana doing my sabbatical,
Hacer un sabático,
preparing for that, I had key people in each of the places, kind of like IDL here.
en diferentes lugares tenía Israel aquí en Cuba, por ejemplo.
Reuben, who could not come to this,
Reuben que no pudo
not
ir.
the Reuben who got sick, but Reuben from Ghana,
Rubén de Ghana,
director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Center,
el rector del centro
said to me, all our churches are black.
me dijo, todas nuestras iglesias son negras.
And I said,
Yo dije,
yeah, I assume they all are
Yo
black.
asumo que sí, que sean negras.
So he said, well, what's this concept of the black church?
Entonces, ¿cuál es este concepto
That's
de
the
la
only
iglesia
church we
negra?
know.
Esa es la única iglesia que conocemos.
And so, even though in America we understand a
En
concept of
América
black
entendemos
church
el concepto de la iglesia negra
because of our experience.
por nuestras experiencias.
And I want us to center that understanding in a global perspective that is
Y ese
inclusive of the fact
Dándole una perspectiva global de ese hecho, de que nuestras iglesias, porque las personas negras eran iglesias negras por sí.
that the black church is actually our experience.
Que la iglesia
As
negra era
black
nuestra experiencia en América Progresiva.
I was and so in Ghana, once Reuben got it,
En Ghana, no hay
he
que
introduced me to a small denomination
a
in
una
Ghana
denominación pequeña en Ghana
that integrated tribal
que integraba
customs and traditions in
costumbres
their
y
worship
tradiciones
experience,
tribales
practice of
en
faith.
sus prácticas de fe.
So they had the various drum
Tenían
beats.
varios
They
toques de tambor,
celebrated all of the festivals
celebraban todos sus festivales
of the tribe as a
Las
part
tribus
of their Christian experience.
como parte de su experiencia cristiana.
And so that was one of the impetuses for this kind of discussion about
Y
authenticity.
esto fue parte de lo que vino a discutirse como parte de la autenticidad de una iglesia negra.
Another example is when I was in Colombia.
Es cuando yo estuve en Colombia.
Ruth took me to a church that I think she only discovered
que pienso que
because
descubrió.
I suggested this is the things I wanted to see.
Yo le dije, estas son las cosas que yo quisiera ver, le sugerí.
And this pastor has a very small congregation,
Es una
and I
congregación muy
think small
pequeña
people, where it is focused on being black and their African heritage
se
as a
enfocaba
part
en
of
ser
that
negro,
practice.
ser parte, la parte africana ahí en ese lugar.
And so again, understanding that I think there are pockets
Entender
of people, lay people,
que
maybe not necessarily leadership or
eran personas comunes,
academic people who
como
are
personas
thinking and
académicas,
saying it
líderes,
this
eran
way,
personas comunes
but they are actually practicing
que estaban
that way.
realmente haciendo sus prácticas de esa manera.
Then the other thing of community
Y
of
la
black
otra cosa,
people,
que es la comunidad de la persona negra,
and I'll tend to use we or our in the writings, also in
yo trato de escribir
sometimes
nosotros,
even in my
nosotros,
presentation.
en mi
That we
presentación.
our for me means a community of black people, individuals, local and global communities,
Entonces, comunidades individuales, locales o globales,
organizations,
organizaciones,
movements,
movimientos
etc.
y demás. Eso es lo que llamo comunidad de personas negras.
Of course, these are black people. And black people, for me, is defined not only as skin color,
Y cuando digo personas negras, no solo por el color de la piel,
but also based on our common customs, traditions, and
también basamos
experiences.
en nuestras tradiciones comunes, experiencias comunes, costumbres comunes.
You remember when Jesus ran to the woman at the well?
¿Recuerdan cuando Jesús
And
se encontró con la mujer en el pozo?
she said to
Ella
him,
le dijo a él,
I don't know why you talking to me,
no sé por qué hablas conmigo,
because your people worship in Jerusalem and we worship here. And he said there was
Tu
going to
gente
come a
hace
day
su práctica en un lugar donde yo no puedo ir.
in which neither one of those worship places,
Y ninguno de esos lugares de
you gotta
adoración
worship me in spirit and in truth.
me van a adorar a
I
mí en
understand
espíritu
that
y
to
verdad.
be, you gotta worship me in an authentic kind of way.
Si tú no me haces una adoración de una manera auténtica.
And I think our authenticity is tied to our blackness.
Y pienso que nuestra autenticidad se refiere a nuestra negritud.
So, yeah.
And this negritude,
When we use blackness or negritude, just asking what do you mean by blackness.
The color of our skin and
no
the
es de color, más es de
ancestry,
The culture.
yeah, customs and traditions.
Costumbre, tradiciones, todo.
One of the things, I'm going to get to this a little later, one of the reasons I am choosing to do this throughout Africa and the African diaspora and choosing some spots, and this may be more for Americans than the commonality of our experiences.
Que con otras personas es la comunidad que hay en nuestras experiencias como personas dentro de Estados Unidos.
For instance, here in Cuba,
Por ejemplo, aquí en Cuba,
the revolution
la revolución,
was intended for the people
la revolución fue algo que estaba hecho para el pueblo,
to be free
para ser
and
libre,
as well as have
así como
access
tener acceso
to opportunities
a oportunidades
and
y
possibilities
posibilidades
on an equal level.
en un nivel igual.
But just as it is in America,
Pero como pasa en Estados
as it
Unidos,
is in Europe,
en Europa,
and even in Africa where we kind of
Incluso en
run
África.
everything, we're always on low and totem pole.
siempre nos tienen en el nivel más bajo.
I don't believe that's because we are less intelligent
No
or
pienso que sea porque somos menos
have,
inteligentes
we don't have great work ethic.
o porque no tenemos buena ética de trabajo,
I think it has a lot to do with who we are.
que tiene que ver
That's that's what I propose.
with who, it has to do with,
That with our blackness, our color,
tiene que ver más con
and who we are as a
quiénes
people.
somos como personas.
porque because the race as a concept fue created para justificar a
Yeah,
it's made-
to justify
Racism.
your position in society in the ground.
Yes.
Es una
Everywhere.
frase como
And
para
teología
justificar que tu
tú.
posición
And theology.
está en el suelo
Yeah,
por ser
exactly.
negro, por tu raza.
Sí, lo que yo quiero decir es que frente a la pregunta
What I
por
want to say is
qué
that why,
que
facing the question,
el
why
concepto raza
this concept
o,
of race,
o la noción raza
or that notion of race,
aparece para dividir la
is
humanidad
presented to divide humanity
en blancos
into white
y negros.
and black people.
Y los blancos son europeos
And white people are the one from Europe,
y los otros, el
And the
concepto
others?
otro, ¿no?
that concept of the others
Son los de color,
are the colored people,
negros,
black,
indígenas
indigenous people,
y las mezclas,
and the mixtures that there are.
¿no? Y el sujeto de la historia, que es el blanco
And that
europeo,
subject of history, which is the European white person,
pues es el sujeto de derechos,
is the one of the rights, the
el
one having the rights,
sujeto del conocimiento,
the one having the knowledge,
el,
is presented also as the one,
el del conocimiento, el del
knowledge, the
poder,
power,
y los demás,
and the others just discarded.
y todos aprendimos esa
And we
diferenciación.
learned with that differentiation since we grew up. It's put into us.
And I'm suggesting, one of the things that I would suggest,
Algo que yo sugeriría,
that division is intentional.
que esa visión fue intencional.
Sí, sí,
Yeah.
claro, por
It's
supuesto.
intentional.
Intentional.
Can I jump into, it's not only intentional,
No
but
solamente
it is
intencional,
necessary
es
to
necesaria
keep the regulation of resources,
para mantener la
i.e. our
regulación sobre el acceso a los
economics.
recursos, la
Economics
economía
and race
y a la
is,
raza.
they're strange bedfellows, but bedfellows they are.
para mantener a las
So
personas en
our
el lugar que
resources
ellos
also,
quisieran.
it's intentional,
Es
but also
intencional
to
también
manage resources
para manejar nuestros
for
recursos
our
incluso.
living.
There are two things that I want to add, and hopefully over the
Hay dos
course
cosas
of
que
this
quisiera
week
añadir.
that we'll be able to delve in these
Pienso que vamos a
various
compartir esta
conversations.
semana.
One, based on what Martin just said, that's why they set markers for us to achieve and to be successful
Para nosotros
and to be
poder
accepted.
alcanzarla y decir que somos exitosos, nos ponen
And
ciertas
those
marcas
are not permanent markers.
y nunca son marcas permanentes.
They're flexible in
Son
their
flexibles, se mueven, suben,
and they
bajan,
keep us so busy
y
trying to
nos
make
mantienen
those
ocupados
markers
de tal manera buscando
that we don't have time to do
que no
this.
tenemos tiempo para pensar en estas cosas.
And to realize that they are using division
Que nos
to
están
keep
usando
us.
de manera dividida.
The second thing on that particular piece is,
La otra cosa
I will say this was hard for me to define. Because I believe that Africa is the origin of civilization. So I believe white people have African and or African diaspora.
Del ser humano. Es el origen de every
It's the origin of everything.
Yeah.
That's all period.
Yeah. So and so I was really trying to craft an understanding of what I really mean by, and I think this is working, a community of black people.
Buscar una comunidad de personas negras, crear una comunidad de personas negras a nivel global.
But I think we're better able to I think without question we are in better positions when we define ourselves. But we have to make the time to define ourselves.
I think part of the difficulty of the project at large is finding language, images, and experiences for talking about blackness that don't require a centering of whiteness. In some ways. I think in some ways there must be a centering of whiteness because we got to talk about evil in very real ways, right? I think that's part of the moral project is to be able to identify, interpret, and contest, disrupt, abolish, blah, 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 forms of structural evil. But there has to be, like, if we want to create brush harbors, which is what I feel spaces like this are, where we're able to be black, do black, love black, recreate black, advance black, outside of the gaze and the domain of whiteness. I think that's wholly important. But the struggle is we only talk about blackness because whiteness has embedded so much meaning into it and has created it as something that is less than human, less than divine, less than sacred. So that's part of my ongoing struggle is like, how can I continue to talk about blackness without ever having to slump into more conversations about whiteness? That's something I wrestle with intellectually, theologically.
It would be great if we could just only talk about blackness. But based upon the reality of our experience, anti-blackness has to be talked about, has to be dismantled. And what's not in white people, in us, so that we can rightfully define and create images and vocabulary, etc., that promote our blackness. And I cannot say this enough. I think they keep us busy doing other stuff so that we don't have these kinds of conversations.
Keeping us busy or incarcerating us or finding other ways where people can't.
And that's keeping us busy because the incarcerated body is probably one of the most overworked bodies and exploited bodies. One of them.
De mantenernos ocupados sin pensar en nuestros problemas.
Sí, bueno, en América Latina.
In Latin America,
Supongo que en Estados Unidos también.
I suppose that in the United States as well.
De un pensamiento afrocentrado.
The people are talking about an Afrocentric way of thinking.
Sí, como usted estaba hablando. Entonces,
Ay, bochín.
Entonces, yo creo que es muy
So I think it's
importante
very important.
es lo afrocentral
What is
para
the
pensarnos,
Afro core of things, so we can focus.
solo que tenemos que
But we
definir
need to define
qué es lo afrocentral,
what is this core of Africanness.
qué es lo ¿no? Porque como dice Martis, no podemos
Marty says we cannot
dejar de lado la
we
dominación,
cannot disregard domination we have been
porque
suffering.
el racismo siempre está,
Racism is always there.
es nuestro pan diario.
It's our daily
No.
fight,
El
daily
racismo.
death.
Es como un reto,
It's a challenge.
el afrocentrismo,
So Afrocentrical way of thinking.
para pensar también
So we need to have it to
la
think
dominación desde nosotros,
about domination.
no pensar
And from us, we need to start thinking about how to stop that domination.
cómo es un pensamiento afrocéntrico.
How can we have this Afrocentric way of thinking?
And if I could just add, to be able to talk in very, and this may belie the concept to some extent, but
Esto puede ser un concepto.
the Western Project
El
just sort
proyecto
of
occidental
requires me to think like this.
me pone a
Is
pensar
to be
en
able to
esto
talk about
para ser capaces de pensar
blackness
de la negritud
and power constructs
y
together.
de
Right?
las construcciones
Because
de poderes poniendo estas cosas juntas.
I know one of the things that
Una de
I
las cosas
find
que yo encontré
when I talk to my black suburban
cuando yo
American
hablo con mi
congregation
congregación
is an aversion to talking about power building.
es cómo construir
Because
poder.
power has been perceived as something
Porque el poder se ha
holy. You know,
percibido.
we say power corrupts and absolute
Todo el
power
mundo habla,
corrupts
poder
absolutely.
corrompe.
That Lord Acton phrase.
Y
And you
la
know,
gente usa
we
frases
have
como
allowed
esa.
ourselves to fall into an aversion to power or a
Hemos caído en
myopic
el universo de poder,
definition of power
una definición de
that
poder
actually keeps us powerless
que
in
nos
a
mantiene sin tener
system
poder.
that is based on power grabbing, power
Que
hoarding,
dicen que poner poder,
power
tener
snatching,
poder, atrapar el poder, agarrar
and the
el
like.
poder.
So what does it mean to
arrebatar
talk
el
about
poder?
blackness?
Todas esas
And you know,
frases
this
que
is
no
not
queremos
new,
usar.
but to talk about blackness, but also talk about power,
Entonces,
right?
tenemos que hablar de
And
la
not
gente
just
que
talk about
habla
the
de poder
domination,
también.
and not just
No
talk
hablar
about
de
the
dominación.
systemic disinheritance,
Y
but
no
to
hablar de
put that
la
alongside
falta de
power
herencia
building
sistémica
in
que
ways
hemos
that
tenido.
maybe power is redeemable in some way.
Entonces hay que pensar que el poder puede ser
I don't
redimible.
know.
¿Puede ser qué?
Redimible, porque se puede redimir. Cambiar ese concepto de que es algo malo, de que es algo.
No, we have power, we have.
Well,
We have.
Yeah,
I believe
again, a part of this is a part of what I would love to be an ongoing part of the conversation. Because to pick up from what Billy Ruth just said, that's why when I use the term community, I think in the terms of Ubuntu. And so, whereas Western civilization has defined power structures that dominate, the power is really within each and every one of us. And so, reclaiming the understanding of power because I am you and you are me is redefining and reimagining those kind of power structures.
And I think that's why I struggle what the manifestation of a new church looks like. This is just my struggle because I'm an organizer and power only comes from the collective. And if we're not gathering, then where are the power base? And so I'm not against the gospel being preached on motorcycles and beating at the park. I'm not gonna get in that argument. But the whole hopes of keeping us together was that we may be able to exercise Pentecost in public. And if we're not gathering, then I find it very hard to mobilize anything that doesn't stay organized.
So the challenge, in my own thinking and in this, there were some people that I wanted voices initially to be here
Hay personas que
who could
dicen
not
que
be
están aquí,
here,
que no están aquí ahora,
either because of finances
Sure.
or
no
because
tenían
of
las finanzas para
timing,
venir o el tiempo,
responsibilities, and etc.
responsabilidades.
And the option occurred to me. Like, there's one brother who was having passport
Tengo un hermano.
issues, who we would have had a representative from the continent here.
Que yo quería
But
que
he was
nos
having passport
representara lo que él
issues.
habla aquí.
And I considered in my conversations with Dr. Callahan, if you
En mi
remember,
conversación con él,
maybe he could be mobile, virtual.
Right.
In
Puede ser
order to
más
do
movible,
gathering.
puede mover
And
más
I wasn't
personas.
at that point yet because I thought the building of the gathering, the physical
Porque
gathering,
yo le
was
hablaba
more important
de
in the
unirse
beginning
físicamente,
than the
de
virtual
movilizar las
thing.
personas
So
físicamente, es mucho más
what
importante
this
que
whole
unirse por la
gathering and
situación que
meeting
moviliza.
is challenging us to do is to
Cuando se reúnen, tiene que haber
redefine what
metas
gathering is.
What the gathering
Para
What gathering
definir a qué
is
se
that
debe la
works
reunión
in
que estamos
this
teniendo en
time.
nuestras congregaciones.
Uh,
And is
Tenemos
it
que definir
possible
por qué nos estamos reuniendo.
to see what the gathering did here as form of revolution?
Y
The
que esa
gathering
incluso se
did
vean como
in the form
revolución.
of producing major legislation that
Esa reunión
essentially
provoca
opened up
incluso
additional doors.
legislaciones
I don't know. This is just my
provocan lo que
struggle.
hacen las
I don't
leyes.
know if it is possible yet
No sé si es posible todavía
to
pero
see
tenemos que buscar
power
eso.
manifested
Que se ve el poder manifestado.
virtually.
I don't know.
So I'm struggling. I really
Es una lucha
I'm
fuerte,
I'm-
pero
I'm-
tenemos que
I'm not
buscar.
struggling in my Pentecostalism
luchando
because
con mi
I started weeping.
Yo empecé
Not just when IDL presented and the word and we went to pray, but
Cuando él empezó a
when the
predicar,
musicians played.
o cuando los
It
músicos estaban tocando.
reminded me when I was in a very, very, very difficult place in my life.
Yo estuve en lugares
And
muy
my pastor
difíciles.
told me I was going to a conference.
Yo iba a una
just tell you all,
conferencia.
the first church I was at,
La
they
primera
put a
iglesia
letter
que
in my
estaba,
mailbox to tell me my services were no longer required.
me mandaron
I
un
was
correo que mi
broke
servicio no lo requería más,
Because
porque
the
estaban
whole
cosas que no querían
concept
escuchar.
of me pastoring was in the structure that I knew.
Porque todo
And
el
what
mundo
church
pastorado
would
estaba
take me
en la
after
estructura que
that?
yo conocía. Y yo no quería que me
And
saliera
the
esa
bishop was ministering to me.
Y
And the
el
bishop,
me estaba diciendo,
I told Bishop, I got to cancel going to Brazil. I was going to Brazil to participate in a conference, and etc. And Bishop told me,
y el adulto me dijo,
you need this space to
tienes
hear
que
from
buscar
God.
un espacio.
I was
Dios,
sitting in Hamundo, who now is at Princeton Seminary,
estaba en un seminario de Princeton en
I
aquel
was sitting
momento.
in his church.
Yo estaba en su
I
iglesia.
struggle with Spanish. I
Yo
struggle
luché
with
con el
Portuguese,
español, con el portugués.
etc. I didn't really understand totally
No entendía
what was
todo lo
going
que
on in the
se hablaba.
service. They were.
El
I do
servicio.
know it was their church anniversary.
Y era
And they
aniversario de la
started
iglesia.
singing,
Empezaron a
playing
cantar,
and singing,
a tocar.
"Great is Thy faithfulness." And though I did not know the
Y
words,
aunque yo no sabía las
that
palabras,
spirit from that
ese
song
espíritu, esas
ministered to
canciones,
me.
y ese-
I came back
ese
and
ministerio,
did what I was so afraid to do,
Y yo
and
que-
17 years later,
conmigo hacer esto y pasaron 17 días y lo logré hacer.
Ah.
Al principio no quería ir y después lo logré hacer.
so in that sense, gathering
En ese
is
sentido,
also a very
reunirse
spiritual kind of thing.
tiene que ser algo muy espiritual.
Very spiritual kind of thing.
Tiene
And
que ser algo
so
muy
one of the
espiritual.
things, this is on the list of ministerial accomplishments
esto
that I'm
una
going to talk
pequeña
about
lista
today.
también.
I wanted to be intentional that you
Quiero
all got a
ser
chance to meet
intencional.
Betty Ruth, especially the Americans, to meet Betty Ruth and to meet IDL
Para
and
conocer a
Alexis,
Ruth,
so
Ariel,
that
y
you
Israel.
will form networks and
Y crear
connections,
redes,
so that
conexiones.
even though you're in America
Aunque usted
and
esté en Estados
IDL
Unidos
is
y
here
ella
or
esté
Betty
aquí,
Ruth is in Colombia
ella esté en
or in
Colombia,
Sao Paulo,
o
you
en Sao
could
Paulo,
be partnering,
ustedes
doing
pueden hacer
ministry,
asociados,
doing
gente
work.
ministerio.
And what that
Con esa
does is also build
Y
relationships
eso va a crear
and
más-
start
más
breaking,
relaciones.
tearing down the walls
Y va a
of
empezar
division
a
among
acabar
black
con las
people.
paredes que no han estado levantando.
Yo quisiera comentar que esa
I would
comunidad
like to comment that that community
es diversa y compleja.
is diverse and complex
Que, o sea, los diferentes contextos nos han hecho
due to the
diversos y
different
complejos.
contexts in which we have been emerging.
Y por lo tanto es una unidad, pero esa unidad no significa uniformidad.
So it will be unity, but it doesn't mean that it will be uniform.
Entonces, unidad en la diversidad significa también una
So
cultura
it
para
will
las
be
relaciones.
unity in diversity that will create culture for a better relation.
Y estaba pensando
So I was thinking about
un poquito en unas orientaciones de Wesley
some orientation from Wesley.
que decía
He
que
used to say
en lo esencial unidad,
that the essence will be unity,
en lo diverso libertad,
and then in what is diversity we will have freedom,
y en todo el amor.
and in everything we will have love.
Entonces, sí me gustaría al menos
So I would
aclarar
like
cuál es la esencia, lo
to
esencial,
clarify what is the
que
essence,
es lo que nos puede mantener también
what is
unidos.
what that can keep us in unity.
Y estaba
What should be
pensando
that essence? And I was
también
thinking
en esta lucha dónde está
in
el
this
verdadero
struggle,
enemigo, ¿no?
where we have the common enemy.
Y a
That
veces-
should be the essence.
y dentro de nosotros también hay una serie de
And also
contradicciones
within
también,
us, we have some contradictions,
y
even
todavía
within us.
hemos logrado, digamos, la libertad jurídica,
So we have achieved, for example, in Cuba, this judicial freedom,
pero no hemos logrado todavía la libertad cultural.
but we haven't achieved cultural freedom.
Y eso
The
también
law is
afecta
there, but what is in the mind of the people haven't been overcome.
nuestra comunidad.
So we should fight in that community for things
Porque a
like that.
veces las luchas, los esfuerzos
Sometimes
están
the struggle, the efforts
para ser como los blancos,
are just set on us to be like the white people.
imitar su estilo de vida,
We imitate their
imitar
lifestyle,
sus sistemas de vida,
we imitate their systems.
incluso la educación nuestra es una
Even
educación
our
también que viene
education is coming from that structure,
desde las estructuras también blancas.
from white structure. We are getting our educational system.
En filosofía,
Philosophy.
ahora es que venimos a encontrar los africanos.
Cuando?
Ahora es que venimos
Now,
a
when people talk about philosophy, it is just now, recently, when we have found Africans as philosophers.
porque hasta ahora los que piensan son los
Because
griegos,
so far,
los
only
demás
the
no.
thinkers were white people in philosophy.
En las artes,
In the
ahora
arts,
es que se viene de
now is when they are talking about Africans. For centuries, only white people in arts.
Aquí una profesora de la universidad cuando empezó a estudiar el arte africano,
There is a professor here in Cuba, when she started studying African art,
le dijeron tú no estás estudiando arte,
they told her, you are not studying art,
estás estudiando cacharro,
you are studying just pots,
basura.
trash. They told her that at the university.
Entonces es difícil
So it's difficult.
liberarse.
This is in the
They're
revolution.
real.
Yo creo que como comunidad tenemos que también promover
So as a community, we need to promote all that.
esa liberación cultural que todavía necesitamos.
We need to attain all that.
But I wonder if we could be, sorry.
No, go
No,
ahead.
you, I talked already.
No. So, I think that it's not when we get here.
No es cuando
It's in utero. It's called epigenetics. And we believe that we're no good because that's what we've been taught.
no es como no es que cuando lleguemos aquí, que salimos del útero, lo primero que nos dicen es ustedes no son buenos porque es lo que nos están diciendo desde que nacemos.
And
salimos
then
del
we
útero.
have the power and
Y
control.
tú tienes que ser como esas
It
personas.
starts with
No seas
us
tú.
at home. That's how we learn. Everything
Eso es lo que
starts
aprendemos en
at
nuestras
home.
casas.
And so
desde que
when
nacemos.
we gather,
Entonces nos
wherever we
reunimos.
gather, see, we in a man frame that we have to gather at the church.
Entonces,
I
por
hear
ejemplo,
you
sabemos que
when you
debemos
say,
reunirnos como iglesia,
we need the church,
que
we
necesitamos
need
una
the
iglesia,
building,
que
but we
necesitamos
are
ese
the church.
edificio.
Absolutely.
Pero
And
cuando
when
vamos a ese
we
edificio, a esa
live
iglesia,
that
estamos siendo
every day,
los que nacimos y nos dijeron
and
que
it's
éramos.
not, and it's not sometimey. Then people can get that because we're intellectual.
No
We
es
have
una cuestión de tiempo,
conversation.
porque nosotros estamos acá de
When
manera
we talk
intelectual
about
conversando en eso.
theology, theology means that we
Pero
can
la
talk to the
teología
people that don't know
Quiere
the
decir que
words
hablemos de lo
to
que no
say,
sabemos incluso
and we take that to them wherever they are.
y llevamos eso para ver dónde
Yeah,
estamos.
piggybacking on what White just shared is
Una cosa
when I
que
use the
White-
phrase the practice and culture of our faith, it is that
Cuando yo hablo
everyday walking
de
around
practicar en
experience
cultura y
of
fe,
being
es que la gente
black
vaya a
person.
practicar ahí,
That's exactly
caminando
what I'm
sobre
talking
su
about.
And we
cultura,
have
su
lost
fe y su
that.
experiencia.
Each one reach
Entra en esos
one.
lugares
That was
que
the
son
phrase
esos.
that was going. When you go, when you get something, you don't leave your community. My husband is always saying, I grew up in Inglewood in Chicago.
Mi
Now,
esposo nació en
everybody knows
Inglewood,
Inglewood
Chicago.
around the world. When you say Inglewood, they say, oh.
Cuando uno dice Inglewood, es un lugar.
They say Inglewood. And let me tell you something. There's pockets of Inglewood
Entonces hay
that's scary.
bolsillos de Inglewood
Even
que
for
sí
me.
comparten cosas.
The thug that my husband calls me, right? But
Pero
Inglewood is a
en Inglewood
beautiful community.
es una comunidad muy
But we
hermosa.
don't get to see that part.
Right.
Pero esa
And
parte no
so
la
great
vamos a ver.
things have come out of Inglewood.
Entonces lo
But
que
we don't
sale
get
de
to hear
Inglewood,
those stories because we're
lo
not
vemos son las cosas
listening.
malas, ve lo que
And
experiencia que
so we
tenemos.
have to listen to the people and we got to go where
Entonces
the
hay que
people are
escuchar a
because
las
we are the
personas,
church.
tenemos
We
que
carry
donde están las
that
personas y
message.
escuchar su
And we have
experiencia.
to listen to what they're trying to
Escuchar
tell
lo
us.
que
We want
están
to give
tratando
them
de hacer.
something. We
Y
want to
aprender
give it
algo.
to them, but
Y
we
queremos darle algo a
we
ellos
want to
también.
hear what they have to say
Queremos escuchar
about
lo que
what
tienen que
it is,
decir
and then we can go from there.
y a
So
partir de
that's
ahí
the
que podemos
bridge.
empezar a avanzar.
And so also another thing, just pulling out, I would say one of the definitions, not only was that phrase of our practice of faith and our practice and culture of faith,
Una
but I
práctica en
also
cultura y
talked
fe.
about or
También
used
quería
this
hablar
label of this gathering of academic and public theologians. And I did not want
teología académica y
theologians
pública.
totally to be defined by those who have been trained to be theologians.
Porque hay que ver la
Those
teología
of
que traen
us
los que
who
han
are
sido entrenados para ser
researchers, those of
teólogos.
us who are pastors, those of us who are para-ministry leaders,
Somos líderes en nuestros ministerios.
laity,
Estamos en el
all
mercado.
of those things I think make up a faith community called the Black Church.
Todo eso
I
nosotros
think all
comprendemos
of
de esa
them are
manera,
integral
podemos hacer
to
esa
who we are
comunidad de la
as
iglesia
the Black
negra.
Church, because the Black Church, as
Porque
you
la iglesia
said,
negra,
is
como
not
dice,
some organism or
no un
organization.
organismo, no una
It is the
organización.
called out believers.
Es un
They're
punto de creyentes,
individuals.
de individuos.
And so if we can live in our blackness,
Entonces, si podemos vivir en nuestra
I
negra,
think that is exactly what Christ has called us to live in our life and life more abundantly.
eso fue lo que Cristo dijo cuando
And so
hablaba
that's
de
why
vivir
this
en
collective
vivir
and this
como
round
mujeres.
table, I was intentional, not just having pastors, not just
No
having
porque yo sea pastor o
theologians
porque yo sea teólogo.
from
Yo
the
puse a todos
academy,
estos conceptos
but I
aquí de
think
manera
all of us are
intencional.
walking around theologians. And
Porque
so
estamos siempre
we
alrededor de
create
teólogos
the entire community
que
because
hacen
we can
un
look at a
entramado de la
spot
comunidad diferente que vivimos.
and they will name that entire region or barrio as
Entonces
they.
crean barrios, regiones.
Example, and I'm gonna go to Martina. I went to Haiti on
Yo
my
fui a Haití
sabbatical.
una vez, por ejemplo.
All the stuff that's on the news and everything.
Todo lo que
When
ven en las
I
noticias.
when I went to Haiti, no question, in Port-au-Prince, I had a driver. It
Cuando ya
was
me tenía un chofer.
small glass windows. I think he was packing. I
Tenía
rolled out the
una
window.
ventana
I went
peligroso
from
todo.
place to place and etc. And OCAP in Cape Haitian, I
Entonces,
was
después,
able to walk around. I
Yo
was on the
caminaba en la
beach,
parte
I
de
did
la
all those kinds of
yo
things.
pasaba en la parte de
And in other places in
En otros
Haiti,
lugares de
I
Haití,
walked away saying to myself,
yo caminaba diciéndome,
what took me so long
¿qué me tomó
to get
tanto
here
tiempo
to experience
estar aquí para
our
experimentar la
people,
realidad en la
and
comunidad que
particular our
visité?
people who
por la
revolted
condición.
against the West, against white people?
Porque lo que dicen en el occidente, las personas blancas, lo que
That part
ustedes
has to be
escuchen.
taught in
And
school
one.
though. That part they don't want you, or taught at home, or taught in the church, because that's the part that we're missing.
Esa es
Kids
la
come
parte
to
que nos
school,
estamos perdiendo. Nos
and
mantienen en
somebody
nuestra
already
casa,
said, they're
en nuestras
learning
iglesias
what
así,
the white man
fundamentadas,
wants you to know.
y no
But
quieren
we
que
don't get
sepamos
the
lo que
other
está
part,
pasando.
so we don't see how
No quieren
great
que
we
veamos cómo
are. We know
funciona
about
la
Martin
cosa.
Luther King,
No tenemos a Martin Luther
but
King,
that's it.
And we don't even know about him.
And we don't.
Y ahora ni
Correct.
siquiera sabemos de
No.
Martin Luther
Martin,
King,
I'm
nos
sorry.
están
Yes.
blanqueando.
So this may be rudimentary, but I really would love for us to leave at least today, or maybe before Dr. Lily leaves. At least can we please define what we are saying blackness is? Like
Definir
literally,
qué estamos diciendo que
physically
decimos blackness.
writing it out. I really
Queremos que se
appreciate
pueda
that.
definir
And
eso
in
antes de
offering
irnos, que se
that,
pudiera definir eso.
what we are defining what blackness is, because we're talking about the black church, but we still haven't
Estamos hablando
been
de la
able
iglesia
to
negra,
create
la comunidad
what
negra,
blackness
qué
is
cosa es
outside of the blanquito context.
y qué cosa es
But
magnitud fuera del contexto de los
and so
blancos.
I'd like to make a contribution to
Entonces
what
quisiera,
I'd like to when I'm thinking about blackness is
a
when
pesar de magnitud,
and I'd love
quiero
to
decir
talk
que es-
more about about
vamos a
the
hablar más de esto.
epigenetics of it all. When we talk about
Uso de la genética.
epigenetics and you know, it's in. You were talking about the seed this morning. Within the seed, the worm can be inside of it. And so I see that as the epigenetics, but I also see that because they always say, to Dial's point, we didn't have black philosophers. Things haven't been written when it has been burned, right? But actually, even with the burning of our text, it's within our bodies. It's within our bodies, it's within our songs, it's within our dances, and the stories and the festivals. So I feel like, I don't know if there's a word for it yet, but like we talk about epigenetics that focuses on the trauma, but I'm also thinking about the history that lies within our genes also. For which we,
legacy.
Huh?
Legacy.
El legado, dice.
I see. It's legacy, but I also feel like it's a form of communication. I feel like it's written. It's not necessarily written.
Que no digo escrita en papel.
But it's written in our souls.
Pero está escrita en nuestras almas.
It's written in our souls and our DNA.
Y en nuestro ADN.
Our story.
Nuestra historia.
And these places allows us for that to come out, especially when we dance.
Crear y buscar esas historias.
When I dance a lot here.
Yo me muevo en esta parte.
And I'm realizing a lot of the Congolese and a lot of my tribe from Africa dances here. A lot of Haitians, our dancing is here. A lot of, I think Ethiopians, they do a lot of this stuff. And so, and that's an origin, and for those who do a lot of, I know that back in the days, Jamaicans used to, so it's still in us, and can we have these spaces? Can we have if we have these spaces too, if whatever is brewing here, can we define what black is?
Podemos a partir de lo que está creciendo aquí definir lo que es negritud. Keep on dancing, maybe the electricity will come
Okay. Sí. Kelly has landed.
Kelly has landed.
Aterrizó Kelly.
Everything is good?
¿Saben si lo fueron a buscar?
To Martine's point about defining blackness.
Entonces, para este punto de definir la negritud.
In some of your writing, I use the phrase new wineskins. That's what I'm hoping we do develop as a result. Now, we may not have a whole lot of those, but to walk away with something that we can begin to actually use in our everyday walking around life that redefines what is our practice of faith and culture, practice and cultural faith.
Teniendo en cuenta nuestras prácticas, nuestra fe, nuestra cultura,
that are based on
que esté basado en
recentering our lens, our focus to our blackness as opposed to just kind of taking what German scholars and others.
Lo que han dicho los estudiosos a través de tantos años.
So those are the new wines, new paradigms we want to develop.
Nuevos paradigmas, crear nuevos paradigmas.
Genocide. Estoy pensando en esta palabra genocidio.
I'm thinking about the word genocide.
Que decimos etnocidio.
We call it geno-ethnic-cidio. Geno-ethnic-side.
En Colombia y Brasil.
It's in Colombia and Brazil. It's not just killing your genes, but also your ethnicity. Okay, your ethnicity.
Wow.
It's putting the words together.
Wow.
Geno-ethnic-side.
En Brasil es asesinado un joven negro cada
young
23
person
minutos.
Is killed in Brazil every 23 minutes. Every 23 minutes, a black young person is killed in Brazil.
Por la policía.
By the police.
Entonces, y las iglesias, eso es genocidio.
That's genocide.
Del pueblo negro, ¿no? Del pueblo negro.
Or from the black people, for the black people.
Pero no es suficiente.
But that's not enough.
Y las iglesias fundamentalistas.
And the fundamentalistic churches.
también cometen ese genocidio.
They commit that ethnicide,
Porque cuando usted se hace parte de una iglesia fundamentalista,
when you become member of a congregation in the fundamentalistic church,
que se llaman también neopentecostales,
they are called themselves neo-Pentecostal churches.
usted tiene que dejar de ser negro.
You have to stop being a black person to be part of that congregation.
White evangelical.
Tiene que asumir toda la cultura
You have to
occidental
Assume all the Western culture in you
para demostrar que es un salvado por Jesucristo.
to show that you were saved and to prove that you were saved by Jesus Christ.
No puedes ir a la iglesia con ropas africanas.
You cannot attend church wearing African customs.
Una camisa,
Not a
se llevan ya,
nothing like that.
ni con estos tejidos.
You cannot use those type of fabric on your clothes.
No, tienes corbata,
You have to be with your tie,
con corbata,
zapatos cerraditos,
zapatos cerrados,
blanquitos.
las mujeres bien peinadas. O sea,
Women should go
esto es
come. I mean,
mal,
tener pelo natural africano es pecado.
es pecado.
Just you need to just straighten your hair.
No puedes alabar a Dios con
You cannot
tambores,
pray God with
con
drums.
ningún objeto que no sea
Western.
los
same time.
occidentales.
You have to use only Western instruments.
Entonces allí hay un genocidio.
So there is when we find
entre la
geno
policía,
ethnic side.
la policía
So the
el
police stealing the black
gobierno
people, the government
con las políticas públicas
with the public
que
policies
abandonan a la
abandoning the
población
population.
y con las
And
iglesias
then
que
these
hacen
neo-Pentecostal
el papel
churches that are
de blanquear la
fundamentalistic,
gente.
Yeah.
that are whitening the black people.
Además, termino aquí,
We finish
además
here,
Keep talking.
la teología
but also theology
está recuperando la discusión teológica del siglo XVIII
is going back and recovering that theology from the 18th century.
que decía que
That
la
said
piel negra
that the
era
black skin
la marca del hijo de Noé
Was the mark or the brand from Noah's son.
que había sido maldecido
He had been cursed
por haber visto la desnudez de su padre.
because he saw his father naked.
Entonces muchos pastores,
So
esto ya
many
es,
pastors are saying, are
ya
repeating
es
that.
una idea popular
It's a popular idea now
que nuestra piel, el
that our
color de
skin,
nuestra piel
the
es
color of our
una
skin
maldición
is a curse.
que solo se redime en Jesucristo.
Can only be redeemed in Jesus Christ.
What Betty Ruth is talking about is conversation one. That I think is supposed to begin this afternoon. But
Okay.
we're going to talk specifically about that because that's real. And the reason, in response to someone said over here about the white evangelical church in America, I also believe it's the white liberal church in America.
Yes.
I believe it is a whitening of who we are. And what I want to challenge and the impetus for that conversation this afternoon and tomorrow, it began with a Negro spiritual because that was the only way I felt like I could define something that would connect spiritually among black people. Two is because for the American black church, one of the things along my travel and sabbatical that I felt like God was tugging at me about, what are we exporting to the rest of the black world?
TBN.
Because I guarantee you, every one of those fundamentalists have seen Bishop Jakes, have seen our mega churches, and seen us, and what we do, and etc. It becomes easier for them to dominate them because we have given license to it, because that's what we're doing.
You know what I wanted to say? This is so true, because when you think about Christianity, our form of Christianity, the Victorian principles of politeness,
los
and
principios victorianos
it has really
de que ser
neutralized us.
tratando de
I mean, when you look
neutralizar a la
at
persona
Jesus
moderna.
was really a revolutionary.
Y
If you
nadie
look
quiere
at it,
decir que Jesucristo
and
fue
we have so
revolucionario,
watered down
y han estado
the fact that
quitando
Jesus
eso,
is a
y
revolutionary,
quieren decir que
that
Jesús
many
es
people
un
don't see it
revolucionario,
anymore.
que Jesús no lo ven
And
así.
all of this politeness, all of
Toda
this
esa nobleza
being
que
docile,
tienen
it's really hindering us from
nos
rising
está
up. We have power
parando
inside of
a
us.
decir, nosotros tenemos
And
poder
it's
dentro de
suppressing
nosotros,
it.
y nos están oprimiendo.
I think about it all the time because I, as a pastor, many times expound some of
Un
it.
pastor militante y soy responsable con eso.
So that bothers me
Y
that
eso me molesta.
we have allowed a form of
Que hemos
Christianity
permitido
to dominate
ese
us
cristianismo
and to
por-
really
por
separate
mal
us
nos
from who
domine
we really are.
y nos está creando la forma de lo que somos.
I know we're talking in the context of the black church, but I see the black church,
También veo
just
que la
black
iglesia
people
negra
in spirituality.
son personas negras con
This
espiritualidad.
Victorian idea and
Esta
these
idea
principles
victoriana
are also used to gaslight
se usa
us
también
in our oppression, right?
para mantener la
And
presión.
also, I even see it in the new age,
Se ve también en la nueva era.
where, they use like the hermetic laws, which is really the Kemetic laws, and they say, well, we're all one. And so you have people like Billy Carson, who's like
Ve a personas como
huge.
Billy
This is
Carson.
the new church. That's where all the
Y
people.
dicen, la iglesia nueva,
They're going to
vamos a ir a
Billy
ver la
Carson. They're
iglesia
going to
nueva.
Ralph Smart.
Y van ahí que son
Who's saying,
inteligentes.
well, we're all one. Blackness
Somos
doesn't
todos
matter anymore.
Y la
It's
dicen,
just
la
a way of
magnitud no es
the
ningún
masters
problema
to
allá.
keep us
Nos están
separated.
diciendo esas cosas. Y es
Which
para mantenernos
it's
separados.
like incessant. It's like very.
Es algo incisivo.
You have to address blackness because
Tienes que
blackness
dirigirte
is
a lo
the
que es
original.
porque eso es lo
Anything less
original.
for, and I'm starting this definition of blackness
O sea que esta
as
definición
love
de
is the primary emotion, and anything
la emoción
absent of that,
primordial.
all the
Y a
emotions
partir de ahí
exist.
salieron todas las demás
Blackness
emociones.
is
La negritud es
I think, the expression of humanity, and
la expresión de la
anything
humanidad, yo
that's
pienso.
lack of that
Y todo
is
lo demás viene de ahí.
whiteness. But the truth is,
Pero la verdad
it's
es
blackness that is
que la negritud
what is humanity.
es lo que es la
And
humanidad.
so when we talk about oneness, I see oneness as
Como la
all
blanquitud.
being one in the black
O ser
identity.
uno solo es ser uno solo en la
And
identidad
so
negra.
when people gaslight us and be
cuando
polite
la
and
gente
say,
nos
oh, it's
trata de
not about
cegar,
that, we're being divisive,
nos
we're
dicen,
doing
"Estamos
all
siendo
these
divididos".
different things. That is not, sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
But all I'm saying that is the reason. This is the reason why I thought we needed to really kind of begin
Esta
to
es la
consider,
razón por la que
we've
digo
been
que siempre que
complicit in our
tenemos
own
que
oppression.
llamarnos
As a result
juntos
of
para
us
evitar
just
esta opresión.
blindly adopting. Now, I
Y
am also
de verdad
challenging you,
adaptar a las
and
personas
this is a
negras a lo que
segue
hay,
to
no
my
debe ser
short-term
así.
objectives for this
Y hay
meeting.
que ser más objetivos cuando hablemos.
I'm also suggesting to
Yo
you
también
that
sugiero
maybe we need to
que también
revisit
tenemos
the
que
teaching
revisitar
and
las enseñanzas
and the whole drama
todo
around the
el
black
drama
church and the
acerca de la
LGBT
iglesia negra,
community.
de la, incluso la comunidad LGBTQ.
Because of our complicit nature
Yeah.
with
La
those who are
naturaleza
dominating.
complaciente que tenemos, a veces nos hace dejar ser dominados.
Not that we can't disagree, but
Porque
we
no
can't even
estamos
sit down at the table and talk together
es
about
que
it.
no hacemos nada.
And what does that mean and what does that do for us? That's just one example.
Entonces,
So the short-term objectives
Entonces, un ejemplo
is
de los
really in
objetivos que
this
tenemos.
meeting, this is a test tube experience. I'm trying to set a stage so that we can
Quiero
develop a
permanecer
space
unos
that has
aquí
these kinds of
para tener
conversations.
espacio
And
para
so,
estas
as
conversaciones.
much as
Quiero
I
que
want X, Y, and Z to happen as a result of this,
mucho que yo quiera ver
this
que
is a
suceda
learning
cuando se acabe este
experience
encuentro.
to put together,
Quiero que se
or
ponga al final algo
to
junto
develop something even
para
greater.
desarrollar
And so
algo
I
mejor.
want you to feel free to
Entonces,
test and
quiero
prove.
que se
Because I
sientan
think,
libres.
again, this is not by happenstance or accident. I think God
Esto no
divinely
pasó por
orders each
accidente,
of us
sé
to
que
be
Dios está
here,
aquí
who
poniendo
you are,
lo que queremos
and
decir.
what that helps build out
Y
this
tenemos que
opportunity
construir
for us to
qué
create this
queremos
space
mostrar
for us to do
a partir de
this.
este espacio y qué queremos
My
hacer.
second objective, short-term objective, is process.
Sería procesar.
I was intentional about setting up facilitation groups. I don't think I explained it well. I didn't want one person or some authority on this to talk about and lecture us about. I wanted us as the collective of academic and public theologians to say, to raise the question, to navigate us, to help us to drive our own narrative. And so that's I think implicit in that is the understanding that we have the power to do this. And again, back to the grounding in Acts 2, the power of the Holy Ghost came because they were together and they were with one another, and the space got filled, and then everybody in the room got and so that is the process. Now, I probably, for right now at least, until we can figure this out anymore, I kind of adopt Naeem Akbar's methodology about deconstruct, reconstruct, and construct. So we deconstruct what we got, we reconstruct that which is salvageable, and then with that salvageable piece and our own creative and initiative ideas, we construct the paradigm.
Una nueva situación. Ese sería el plan, de construir lo que nos han estado imponiendo y construir.
And so that's why again, the backdrop of Haiti, the backdrop of Cuba.
They're sisters.
The backdrop of Cuba. And when I say the backdrop of Cuba, I mean the history of Cuba, and particularly Afro-Cubans. I also, as I said last night, your sensibilities to things around you. To notice how young people are dressing. Another thing that we export unconscious. But they all trying to be like us, African Americans.
I saw that.
And so that we can start asking ourselves, what in the world are we exporting for the rest of the world?
¿Qué estamos exportando al resto del mundo nosotros desde Estados Unidos? Esa es mi
And
pregunta.
so I want that to come, and I want you to be able to see that. I want you to be in a place where they can't say this, but I'm going to say this. That they were integral to the revolution, and they were promised X, Y, and Z. And on the other end of the revolution, that us in the liberal community in America said, "Ooh, what was great and marvelous, and etc."
So I think, and I appreciate the conversation because it helps me. My whole understanding of the church is not constructed on a building. It's the gathering that moves us as a people. And what I'm asking for is if there's another institution that is apt and able, if there's another organized body to bring in black folks intergenerationally and those that are marginalized, I'll be willing and ready to stand alongside work here. But for me, I wouldn't call a gathering of all black people the black church if it is not built on meaningful relationships that move people up and out of the miserable condition that most of us are in. Right now, most of the activists we call black church, it's a black preacher. So the activism most of the time is coming from the black pastor. That helps most of us understand what we ought to be doing. I'm asking for where can we have a much better, deeper understanding that even if it meant driving us not just up and out, but driving us in and deeper to an understanding of ourselves. Without race organizations, where is it going to come from? Because ain't no NAACP. They're getting ready to have some more trouble. Got the Urban League. What I'm saying is I'm not anti them. I'm saying that nothing connects with our people outside of hip hop.
I would suggest that I think one of the things that I gleaned just from this introductory period, that is our spirituality. That connects us. And how do we leverage that spirituality as black people to a space in which we are organized, and particularly in the black community? Collaborative partners at the intersection of that's the long-term objective. How do we position ourselves as a black church? how do we
como tú lo dijiste, la iglesia negra,
reclaim?
¿cómo vamos a
Because
hacer un
I would suggest
reclamo
to you
de
that
esas
the black
iglesias?
church, at least the black church that I grew up
Por lo
in,
menos la
is
iglesia
very
negra en la
different
que
than
yo
the black church
crecí,
today. And the black church then
la
was
iglesia negra en aquel
the
entonces
individuals. I think he
atendía a las
could
personas de
move
manera
a
individual.
movement because those people saw their blackness
Porque esas personas
connected
veían
to their
esa,
faith.
esa negritud en la fe que profesaban en
But
esa
don't you
iglesia.
think that, so that the civil rights movement
El
happened
movimiento de
because
los
we
derechos
had
civiles
somebody that was
surgió,
willing, after he
era porque
said
ellos
no, he
querían,
said yes,
tenían la voluntad
to take on that job.
de
We don't
hacer ese
have
trabajo de
that.
organizar.
The reason why
Y no tenemos eso en
can't
nuestras iglesias, y la
get
razón
to
es
where we
que
want to be is because we don't have that leadership.
porque no tenemos ese
We
liderazgo,
don't have somebody
no
to
tenemos a
say,
alguien
to
que
be
diga
radical enough
que sea lo
because they
suficientemente
stopped a whole lot
radical,
of stuff from happening because they was radical. They said we
porque
ain't gonna
pararon
we
todo
gonna
eso con
walk
el movimiento
15
civil
miles
porque
to
vieron que
get
era
to
muy
work. We're
radical
gonna do all
y lo
this stuff.
pararon.
We have to bring the people together
Tenemos que
by
unir a
being
las
radical.
personas
So
y
if
ser
we're
radicales
saying that
y
we
que
don't
entiendan
agree
que
with
no
us
estamos de acuerdo
buying in
con
to
lo que
this
tenemos,
white
que es blanco,
church,
que
then we
es una
gotta move.
iglesia blanca,
But we're comfortable, in my
pero
opinion, this
estamos
is just
muy
my
cómodos en
opinion.
donde
We're
estamos,
comfortable where
Estamos muy
we are
cómodos
in our position.
en esa
Because you
posición.
said something that was very key.
y eso es algo que es
That
clave, salir de esa
they keep
posición
us busy.
aparentemente de confort.
Yeah.
In these white church organizations,
Entonces esas organizaciones de iglesias
they
blancas,
every now and again you'll see somebody
tú ves de
that
vez
look
en
like
cuando
you
alguno de
in a
ellos
leadership position
que
that really
tienen
got the
posiciones de
power. Because they
liderazgo
can give you a title,
y te
but
dan
if
un
you don't have
título
the
incluso,
power, you ain't going
te dan
nowhere. You just
poder.
got a title, and that's for show.
y eso
And
para
so,
mostrar eso.
if things are going to change, then it's
Y si
going
las
to
cosas van
take
a
people
cambiar,
saying, okay, this is not it, because we've
Tenemos que
already
esto no es lo que queremos.
we fed this information to the
Tenemos
people
que darle
because that's
información a
what
las
we do every
personas,
Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. We
domingo
feed
tras
them
domingo, decirle
what
qué
we
está pasando
think we need to be feeding them because we've bought
y
into
saber
that
con
white.
qué lo vamos a alimentar cuando hablamos con ellos
Right.
y ellas.
We're not giving them what they need to
No le
hear.
estamos dando lo que
We're not
necesitan
giving them the
escuchar.
thing that's going to feed them to say, hey,
No estamos dando las
and
cosas
sometimes
que
you
le va a
just gotta
alimentar
walk
para que digan,
away
bueno, esto está mal
from what's comfortable
y
to
tenemos que
bring
salir
it.
de
It's
lo que
gotta be
aparentemente es
radical.
cómodo.
I would suggest to you that
Yo les
we are the
sugeriría
church. Like that,
Yes,
you
for
said
sure.
earlier, that-
We are.
and we are
En
the
sus trabajos, en
leaders
sus
who
iglesias,
are going to bring that.
ustedes
So
sean los
we got- I
líderes
think
que
that
lleven
we
eso.
become more confident about
Y
doing
que tengan
that
más confianza en
when we
hacer
come
eso
from spaces
y que
like
creen
this
espacios
and
como
create
este
spaces, support spaces around
de apoyo
us so that we could do
para que
that.
podamos
And
hacer eso.
so instead, even though in my denomination
Incluso,
and my church is an American Baptist,
mi iglesia es una iglesia bautista americana,
president of Connecticut, American Baptist,
Connecticut,
predominantly white in the sense of active and money and resources and
y ellos
etc.
son blancos en el sentido
But
de la
one of the
armonía,
things, in
del
particular
liderazgo y del
COVID,
dinero.
that I raised because I came to my own kind of a new
Entonces,
level
yo
of
ya
my
mi
own
own
awareness
conclusión
was that
y yo lo que hice
something
fue
happened in our region
que
that
cuando
was
comenzó en
around
nuestra
race,
región,
and I just simply said it to the
yo
president.
siempre dije,
That ain't for black people. That ain't black people issue. That's your issue.
yo siempre dije a esas
And they
personas blancas que dirigían la
started
iglesia,
meeting,
eso no es una cuestión de las personas negras, es una cuestión de ustedes.
and discussing how they have been implicit because they have been able to preach,
Ellos no
they
son
preach
capaces
the
de
love of Jesus,
predicar
etc. But they
acerca
weren't
del
able to
amor.
call out the sin
Pero hablan nada más que del
and the
pecado.
sin of racism and etc. So I think we become, and what I hope of this is that these new paradigms, these conversations that we're having, that we become the leaders on all levels. Not just the pastors, but laity and our various callings and assignments to kind of begin to promote this understanding.
So I think what Brother Dwight said is powerful. He reminded me. I did an interview of Y.T. Walker. And I asked Dr. Walker, I said, how did you get involved in the movement? He said, well, I went to a meeting and we were all together. And that synergy in the room made me say, oh, I'll do that. And somebody else said, I'll do that. And the next thing you know, I was a part of a movement. So I didn't intend to show up there leading anything.
Right.
I was just coming to the meeting. And he said it was small enough, it wasn't a large gathering, but the synergy in the room
para hacer
said it
cosas.
made him get involved.
Y fue lo que
So
lo
he
hizo
wasn't
involucrarme
like
en el
he showed
movimiento.
up to be this radical person,
Él no se mostró ahí
but he
siempre
showed up with
queriendo
his
ser el
gifts.
persona radical
He
que
said
iba a ser.
Dr. King was all
Subió
over
de
the
ahí.
place, and I had the gift
Como
of
Martin
pulling
Luther
it
King, que
all
estaba en todos los
together.
lugares y de todos los lugares salía su
And, you know,
mensaje.
saying, hey, you can't do this. And he said, and there were other people who had
Y hay
other
otras
gifts.
personas que siempre estaban diciendo, no,
But
no
I
puedes
think
hacer
the
esto.
point that you made is they were
Entonces, el
together,
punto que hay que hacer
and
aquí
in the
es,
power of them
tú
being
te unes
together,
y el poder va a
emerged
surgir
these
en esa
leaders.
unión.
The
Esa
space,
persona
you feel the
radical.
space and it all.
Usted llena el
Everybody in
espacio y el poder va a llegar.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Melanie.
Just to underscore that point, I think about
Para entender este
this a
punto,
lot, and my
hay
work
mucho
is
aquí que discutir.
in what do we do once we come together. So
¿Qué-
I would
qué
just
vamos a hacer
push it
cuando
a
nos
little
reunamos?
further to say it's not just about us coming together, but
Y
it's
es
what
no solo
happens
reunirse,
when we're together and
sino que sucede
how
cuando nos
we
reunimos.
go about
¿De qué vamos a
co-creating
hablar cuando
a
nos
kind of
reunimos?
container or synergy
¿Qué
that
sinergia va a surgir cuando
empowers
nos
and
reunimos?
allows us to become
¿Qué
different.
poder va a surgir
I
cuando
think
nos
those are the
reunimos?
kinds of skills
¿Qué
that we
habilidades vamos
don't
a
have,
lograr
that
cuando
we
nos
haven't been
reunimos?
trained for.
Porque no hemos sido
We are
entrenados
experts
para
in
eso.
content, but not in process, which goes back
Entonces,
to
tenemos el contexto,
one of your
contexto, como
provocations
tenemos el
to us
proceso.
is like how will we be together, but there's skill, there's
No es solo cómo vamos a reunirnos,
there's an
sino qué habilidades vamos a poner en
intentionality
práctica
of centering
cuando
and
nos reunimos.
decentering
That's
Lo
right.
que
that
usted
is
habló
as
de la
important,
parte
I
negra
believe,
siendo el
if not
centro.
more, than all of the content that we bring or we
Porque
want
eso
to
va a dar
bring
más que todo el
to the
contenido
table,
que
because
llevemos a
that's
esa
where black
reunión.
people,
Lo
most
que
people,
logremos ahí.
but that's where we get tripped up. And there's
Y
trauma
eso es lo
in
que hay que
that.
adoptar.
For how many of us have been part of black spaces,
¿Y cuántos de nosotros
black
hemos sido parte de esos
countries,
espacios
black
negros?
organizations
De esas
that have
organizaciones
also been
negras.
sites of trauma for
Y
black
también
people.
qué drama hemos
So I think
sufrido
we
para
need
personas
to
negras que podemos poner como
de-glorify us
experiencia.
just coming together, which is hard in of itself. It's a
Reunirse es
triumph.
bastante difícil ya, pero
But
cuando lo
also we need
logremos,
to reskill
¿qué hacemos?
ourselves
¿Qué
and
habilidades
appreciate
ponemos ahí?
the process, the how
¿Qué proceso
of
vamos a
being and
poner ahí?
becoming once we come together. It's
Una vez
as
que nos
important,
reunamos.
if not more.
para hacer más?
One of the things that I am thinking through
Una de las cosas en las que estoy
about
pensando
this
acerca de esto,
prophetic mandate of black Christians across the world, but
es el mandato
I'm
de
particularly
proficiencia entre los
situated
cristianos negros en el
in
mundo
the United States. And one of the
y
things
particularmente en los Estados Unidos. Y
that
esto
I'm
es,
thinking through is
lo que estoy pensando es
how part of the challenge,
como parte del reto,
one of the barriers that
una de
I
las
often
barreras
find in
que
doing
me
organizing
encuentro
work
en mi trabajo de
is
organización
actually the over-romanticization of what happened in the
es la
60s.
sobre
Is we
romantización que se ha
create
hecho,
this smooth narrative
que se crea
of
una narrativa muy
unity
ligera que,
and
que
almost
pasa muy
universal
suave.
movement among black folk that
Y el
actually
movimiento
changed
negro.
this country. That becomes the narrative.
Y es la
And then
narrativa
we
que se ha
tell
creado.
ourselves this narrative like, oh, King's folk were so unified. King was
Que con-
a
que Martin Luther King
a
todo
leader
estaba
like no
unido,
other leader
que
have
con
we've
Martin
ever
Luther
seen in the
King
world. We
había un
tell
buen
ourselves
líder,
these romanticized
y se
narratives
romantiza
to the
todo eso
point
que
that
pasó.
we, to use like Eddie Glaude's language, is we create these giants
Entonces
that
crean
we
un
don't think
gigante
we can stand
que
up
no lo
to, live
tenemos
up
y que
to,
ahora no
and
podemos
therefore
lograr.
we find ourselves in these
Y nos vemos entonces
postures of apathy or resignation, right?
teniendo
So I
un
think
apetito con un
that's
tipo de persona,
one of the things
o
that
nos
we
resignamos a no tenerlo.
have to figure
Nos
out
ha dado
is to
esa
actually
narrativa también.
tell a truer story
Entonces hay que hacer esta
of
historia más
what
corta,
changed the country for the limited amount of time that it
buscar, pero no
changed the
tenemos
country,
tiempo, hay que cambiar el
and
país.
is not the story that they teach in school, right?
no la historia que
your
nos cuentan en
earlier
la
point,
escuela.
because I mean, one, Dr. King was
Porque Dr.
surrounded
King estaba
by
rodeado
some powerful women
de mujeres poderosas
who did the work that he was not capable of doing.
que no era capaz
I mean,
de
we're
hacer.
talking about women and virtually children,
Estamos hablando de
18,
niños,
19-year-olds
mujeres y niños.
going to prison.
de que fueron a prisión
Like,
incluso.
that was a move in
Eso
this,
fue
in this
una
country
movida
that we have
fuerte.
to consider. Another thing I think we consider
otra cosa
as
que
we
hay que
sort of
considerar es
think about what we do in this time
el que hacemos en
is
este
the fact
momento,
that, you know, the civil rights movement was
el
living
movimiento de derechos civiles
in the flow of
estaba en el flujo
a zeitgeist revolution was happening all over the world. Right? It was not something unique to the United States. You were talking about decolonization that's happening on the continent. You're talking about things that are happening in Latin and Central America that is also very around the same time. That is a spirit of revolution that was happening. And so we ask ourselves the question, like, is that spirit of revolution globally alive now? One question. And is it even necessary for us to have the kind of massive movement that is necessary in our countries that would currently work? Again, I'm thinking about America in particularly. And the other thing that's coming to mind, and these things may not thread together particularly, is when we talk about the footprint, how many people were actually engaged in the organizing of the civil rights movement? Sometimes, we find, it was a very small amount. There's a really good chance that there are more black congregations committed to social justice in the United States now than there were in the 1960s. So what does that mean now? That we actually do have more churches that say they are committed to this work. We do have pastors who are leveraging social media, lay leaders who are leveraging social media to do this type of work, but we're still not having the same impact. I think it causes us, if nothing else, this is an invitation. You are invited to an invitation to have a serious read of that period that we romanticize, but also a serious read of where we are today with the resources that we have today, asking ourselves some questions that I don't know that we always have space to ask ourselves.
Let me say this. Can I say this? Dr. Walker said, he said, you're not hurting enough.
Ustedes no están dañando lo suficiente.
He said, you're not experiencing indignity enough.
Ustedes no están
You're not
experimentando con
experiencing
suficiente
enough.
dignidad.
He said, so now you're able to sit, and every now and then you get inconvenienced and you show up at the
De vez en
meeting.
cuando tú te incomodas con
Every
algo que pasa,
day.
pero tienes que ser todos los días
The
indignarte.
foot was on our neck.
Todos los días
So I came
ese
to
pie
the
está en
meeting
tu
to
cuello y
breathe.
tienes que indignarte todos los días.
You understand? So
¿Entiendes
that's
lo que quiero
why
decir?
we're
Eso es lo
not.
que está pasando.
You,
Que la gente
they're
se
showing up
acomoda
because they have no other choice.
porque no
We
le queda
got
otro
choices.
remedio que
I get to
acomodarse.
decide
Y hay que
whether or not I
decidirse
want to be in this.
si yo quiero estar
But he
dentro de esa
said to me,
comunidad o no.
you're not hurting enough.
Sure.
Usted no está siendo herido lo
sorry.
suficiente.
I'm sorry. I think that spirit of historical analysis
Es un espíritu del análisis histórico.
is as wrong as two left shoes, with all due respect to.
Con todo respeto, pienso que eso es un análisis equivocado.
Simply because
Debido
of
simplemente porque
the extraordinary measures of pain and suffering
la
that
extraordinaria
are
medida
going on
de
in
dolor
our
y sufrimiento que hemos tenido
would
no puede hacernos
suggest to
acomodar.
me that perhaps Dr. Walker is not as
Lo que me hace saber que el doctor
personally
Walker
acquainted
no está al
with
tanto
some of that,
entonces
with
de todo
some
ese
of that pain.
sufrimiento que hemos tenido.
So to suggest that
Para
what
sugerir
people need to
que la
move
persona necesita para moverse
is simply more pain,
más dolor.
No, I
and that
wouldn't-
what we
I wouldn't argue that he was saying
what we
that.
lack is
Ahí carece eso.
in motivation is because of some kind of absence of pain.
Nosotros no
This is
necesitamos
what I'm
dolor
hearing.
para
This is
movernos.
what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
I
And
wouldn't,
I just
I
like
wouldn't
to-
equate it like that. No,
Yeah,
I
Yo no lo
see,
diría
but I
de esa
would.
manera.
yeah, I wouldn't.
See, I would. I think it's the privilege of certain people
Es privilegio
in
de ciertas
conditions in which
personas
they live
y los lugares que ellos
to
viven
talk that way.
de hablar de esa
I mean,
manera.
not that I would dissuade them. But what I would say is that that's a different place from a lot of
Otro lugar,
people. Just as there may be more communities
tal vez puede haber más
that at
comunidad
least in what they say
en lo que dicen
are committed to
y en lo que están
some
comprometidos
form of social justice.
por un tipo de justicia social.
I would say that
Yo diría
the numbers of people
que el número de personas
who are suffering
que está sufriendo
daily,
diariamente,
not only in the United
no solo en los
States,
Estados Unidos,
but all over the
pero en
world,
todo el mundo,
right? Where 2 out of 5 people on the planet make only
más
$2
2 de
a
5
day.
personas están viviendo con $2 al día.
I think that there's a sufficient amount of suffering to motivate
Yo pienso
people
que es suficiente motivación para que la gente se motive
to move the planet.
para mover el planeta.
Apparently, there's something else, or there's other things that are
Hay algo más que necesitamos.
missing.
I would suggest a couple things, and this is a very safe way to potential outcomes for this. Dr. Kelly encouraged me earlier, because I was really only thinking through the norm. And I think you were raising something that I really did make a connection to with it. We are only taught the superficial stuff. And now see, this is where I think the liberal perspective comes in to keep us alive. No one really talks about the fact that preachers and congregations were talking about liberation and equality from a perspective. I think Dr. Kelly wrote that book about the talking book, the African Americans and the Bible. That's how they kind of dealt with and talked in their language about social justice, etc. And so the people who were coming to the rallies, they already had a certain kind of sufficient background. They heard it on a regular kind of basis and etc. What I'm saying, so what Kelly suggested to me was, I'm thinking we're gonna write a paper and we're gonna put it in periodicals and all that kind of stuff. Do you think
hablamos de eso, solo predicamos de una manera muy especial.
They will show, watch a documentary.
Then it dawned on me that what you're, I mean, the connection, that there were ways in which we communicated our understanding of our faith and culture among each other that was on a regular kind of basis. I also think, though, not necessarily romanticizing about it, but like in Albany, Georgia, over on the east side of Albany, everybody went to church. When I say everybody, I don't mean every one of the 100%, but 98, 99.9%, which even Trump went to church on Sunday. And so that was a space in which that preacher and even my better understanding of the shouting. Now I grew up in the South. Now them women would shout and holler, and your hair would stand up on your skin. It was their way of releasing from that pressure. That Kingdom took that kind of energy or synergy and create a helpful kind of formalize the movement. Now, liberal white people don't want you to understand that, because they're against the church and that kind of organized religion and all those kind of things. I'm saying we need to have those kinds of discussions. And what I'm saying out of this, the outcomes that would be normal, I want us to really think outside of the box. How does this become something, you said this earlier, well, I kind of paraphrased you, becomes everyday walking around experience for us. And I think, for me at least, that's a challenge. I'm generally provoked because I'm in conversation with people, and we are on an individual kind of way. I'm provoked because I may show up at a conference where they may be talking about something like this. But it's not, I don't even know how to say this. In my community in New Haven, I think Melinda, Melinda and School came to watch night, I think, one year.
Okay. Yes, we did.
And they came to the house after watch night, and we were sitting down talking. And I think Melinda posed a question to me. She said, "Are people preaching like this?" Yeah. And I never thought about it. And I felt like I was doing it in isolation after she raised that question to me. And so I think a part of what I'm trying to promote is, you're absolutely right. I think they got to hear from the pulpit. They got to hear from the Will It Be Workers network and event. They got to hear, how do we get what these new paradigms are? What are these things out to people everywhere? And so I'm challenging us this week as a part of setting the faith to think through that and think of that in a much broader sense than for which I was at Brewed.
Kelly brought the light.
She brought the light.
Kelly brought the light. She brought the light.
We made it.
It's so good to see you. And that's what I think. That's what I think. What I say to be radical, those are the things that we have to do to
Cuando
be
yo digo que ser
radical.
radical,
And not,
es
you
que
know,
uno
I
refiere, hay que
totally
tener esa
get that the
actitud.
civil rights movement
Y no
is
solo pensar en el movimiento de los
romanticized.
derechos
I
civiles, hay
believe
que pensar en lo que
that.
está
But I
pasando
also
ahora.
believe
Y no
that
sentirnos cómodos con las
every
situaciones que vamos a
kid
tocar.
in school knows
En
about
las escuelas hay que hablar de las cosas
and
también.
so, yeah, they know the name. That's what I'm saying. Because that's in the school system.
En los
They say,
sistemas
oh,
escolares,
you can talk with
dicen,
Black
no puedes
History
hablar de
Month,
esto.
but Martin Luther King.
No hable de
I don't
Martin
allow
Luther
my
King de esa
students to
manera.
be Martin
Habla
Luther
como
King,
están los
Barack
libros.
Obama, you know, because
Hablan
those
de
are the
Obama y
popular
Obama no
people.
fue lo suficiente.
And you gotta go through that. But I mean,
Hay que, lo que quiero
having
decir es
these
que
conversations and opening
tener
up the
estas
space,
conversaciones
creating
con una
space
perspectiva
for
más
people that
abierta,
even
un
have a
espacio
thought to change what
para
they're
las
thinking.
personas
They're
que
being
puedan
fed.
cambiar.
Social
Al principio las
media,
personas van a tener miedo.
you know, the
Hay
world
que hablar
is
con los
feeding them.
medios.
And we are
Los
not
medios
giving
del
them
mundo nos
exactly
están
what it
presentando las cosas de
is
otra manera,
that
no
they
como
need
son.
to hear so that they can have an option.
Entonces hay que
Because
buscar
when
otra
we
opción.
give access, we give options.
So even in this space, it's been intentional.
Este espacio es intencional.
It was much harder for people on the continent because
Era
of the
más difícil para
expense
personas del continente
to come here.
venir aquí.
Luckily, well, at this point, luckily I had a connection
En una conexión con
with Emilio, who's in Sao Paulo. He's from Angola, but he was trying to renew his Angolian passport. And anybody know how the system kind of works. And he was doing that from Brazil. That just did not happen in time for him to get a visa. I wanted to have Betty Ruth's IDL, Emilio's voices, because I'm not sure in America that we as black people are aware that there is a revolution going on in Latin America, on the continent, etc. About these very kinds of things. I remember, again, public sabbatical, I was in Paris, and I was with some Sinhalese, and one woman who was just taking me to her shop, and so I said, why are you in Paris and not in Senegal? And she said, because our leaders gave all our stuff away. And I came there to get our stuff. That's the kind of revolution that's happening on the continent as well. So again, part of this is the kind of conversations that are happening, courageous conversations that are happening not only in the space, but in the social spaces with each other as well, so that we kind of began to share information, etc. I'm sorry.
And thinking again about, and this might have been Daryl who brought this up, maybe even Martine, is thinking about the spirituality of movement building and the spirituality of revolution. And part of the danger that I sense about the romanticization of the nonviolence civil rights movement in the 1960s is we act as if they didn't fail more than they won. Right? When you think about Auburn, failure. When you think about things that happened in Florida, failure. Chicago was a failure, right? There were way more, I mean, during those 381 days in Montgomery, they were filled with moments of legal failure, legal regression, retaliation, and part of the way we tell the civil rights story so seamlessly is we bleach out all of those moments of failure, and it sets our expectations up as if change actually does happen at a dime, at the drop of a dime. And so when I think about spirituality and how black churches can engage in this particular moment of revolution is how do we also cultivate some stamina for that failure? Because I mean, I've been doing community organizing work for years, and I've lost more campaigns than I've won. Right? To be honest, I can probably count on one hand the number of policy changes that have grown out of the kind of church-based community organizing that I do, and I think this is why Occupy movement was ultimately a failure. It's why I think the Black Lives Matter movement is consistently losing its teeth. Is there is a way that we talk about history that does not honor stamina through failure in this work, and that's where the spirituality comes in for me. What sustains us in between the winds when those wins are 3 years apart, 4 years apart, 5 years apart.
So again, I gave you the long-term perspective. It's the repositioning of the black church, the reclaiming the black church, because I do think what Willie talks about that with the win, the victories and the losses, doing the just using the movement, the civil rights movement. I think it did something internally. Maybe the reason King had the foreknowledge to say to the white donors and liberals and Jews who were seeking funding for that I don't need for you to be in front of. I need them to see us, because that does something in them. And so whether or not King they got the civil rights bill passed or not, that was a movement happening in the people. And so I'm challenging us in the long term with this kind of work to start reimagining what those outcomes are. For instance, I had not considered that somehow we've got to educate our people about endurance through the movement or the struggle, and that every failure ain't a loss.
That's true.
In order to, because I think he's quoted two of more powerful kind of movements that kind of fizzle. Now, I would also contribute on my side, taking license as the facilitator for this one, is I think when there's a lack of moral compass, and I don't want you to put in judgment when I say moral compass. I think I'm using more in the broader sense of communal standards. That we clearly define as the community, and to stick to that and to move forward. If maybe, I'm not saying this is totally conclusive on my part, but maybe that's one of the things that exist. And so that's why I think, and I'm just going to run quickly to the timeline, I want to try to do this for 3 years. And then merge this with something I'm doing with cross-generational leaders that is not around religion, not around faith, none of that kind of stuff, to eventually merge those two. I don't think in the black church, what we romanticize as the leading agent in the civil rights movement, I don't know if we're going to be there anymore. But I think we can be effective collaborators within community to move us. So that's still in my presentation about the overview objectives that I have for short-term and long-term here, and then for us to engage. And just as we have been engaging, I trust that this will be the entire week and beyond. Now, there are more things, I think, in regards to possible outcomes that we're going to talk about. There are, for instance, one of the things that I originally had planned is that Dr. Callahan was leading the group this afternoon and tomorrow, and the group that I'm leading Thursday and Friday would walk away communicating with one another to develop some kind of consensus position on the topics that are given. And that's to be circulated among you all, those who want it. I also want to encourage people who, once that consensus is developed, I may not totally agree with the consensus. So I want you to be able to say, okay, I want to put together something, writing consensus. And for those of you who have expertise in a certain kind of area, that this is promoting the thought, I want to encourage you. I think Dr. Callahan had a conversation, I think one time with Dee about, I think Dee's going to talk about, Dee experienced firsthand Fidel when he came to New York City, and that maybe in relation to this kind of conversation, maybe write something about it. So we want to encourage that, but I also want to try to set up podcasts where we are just engaging in conversation with one another over a period of time. I don't know how to really do that technologically with all we do in different places, but I'm sure there's got to be a way, and so that's one of my assignments to work to do that. So, and at the end, I want you all during this week to be thinking about potential outcomes again, so that this becomes, the word becomes flesh and dwells upon us.
what she was talking about.
preachers.
So,
That's it. I had planned, we're gonna get ready to go to lunch, I believe, Ideal.
I believe
So, so for background, I think I'll try to integrate this into the various sessions. I hope that all of you had a chance to read Achebe's Things Fall Apart
Yeah, that one.
and theology, and then over to theology brewed in the African pie. Just as notes, I'm gonna recite these three things and each of them, and then we're going to lunch. For Things Fall Apart, if you will be mindful of the sense of community, how he talked about community, how it was developed, how it worked. The conversation of the elder with the white missionary in the hut toward the end. And then what are your thoughts about, I think I'm pronouncing this correct, Okonwo, suicide and burial. The sense of community developed by the conversation of the elder with the white missionary, and Okonwo's suicide and burial. For the theology brewed in the African part, the three things that I really wanted to pull out was talking sensibly about God. Talking sensibly about God. In this everyday walking around, how do we talk sensibly about God? The second thing that he wrote about that I actually connected to Dr. Callahan's work, the talking book. And I think Martine said this earlier. We are all writing our own testaments. And how does that become audio for us? And then third, what I'm calling discovering our spirituality. Discovering our spirituality. I put a hyphen in between this.
That second point again.
What was the second one?
The talking book.
No, the second point.
Yeah, the talking book. I reference your work based on the fact that, and connected to what Martine talked about, that we are all writing, it's all inside of us, etc. We're continuously developing our own testament. I think that's what it talks about. That's normal to kind of how we do culturally and customary process.
And so, and the first point then.
The first one is talking sensibly about God.
And what's the second one?
The talking book.
What's the
Inside of you
idea?
is a testament.
Say again?
You can speak from the inside, from the culture. You speak from your inside.
Okay.
And then the last one, covering our spirituality. Discovering. That's it.
Great job for stirring the pot there.
You all agree with me. I'm just trying to be the provocateur.